My name is Emily. I'm turning 35 this year. My only daughter is in elementary school and is going through a bit of a rebellious phase, but she's still adorable. My husband, Jason, and I have been married for over 10 years, and we get along well. However, the problem lies with his family. My husband has an older brother. Though they aren't far apart in age, their personalities are complete opposites. Compared to my straightforward and stubborn husband, his brother seems indecisive and timid. But, his brother has always done well academically, graduating from a prestigious university and working for a well-known company. 2 years after my husband and I got married, his brother introduced a woman he wanted to marry to us. She was flashy and, to put it bluntly, not very bright. Everyone thought she might be deceiving him, but he seemed happy to be with her. Thinking this was probably his only chance to marry. Given his shy nature, the parents reluctantly agreed to their marriage. Needless to say, this sister-in-law turned out to be a snake. 5 years ago, when my mother-in-law hurt her leg, we built a 2-family house and have been living there since. My mother-in-law often comes to me with her problems. My relationship with my mother-in-law is good. My daughter is attached to her, and despite her injured leg, she can manage her daily life quite well. So sometimes she looks after my daughter when I have errands to run. One day, when I went to share some fruit I got from my parents with my mother-in-law, an unbelievable incident occurred. As she answered a phone call, I could see her face becoming confused. I tilted my head, trying to gauge the situation, and what I heard was a loud voice on the other end of the phone. It sounded like a woman's voice, but I couldn't make out what was being said. My mother-in-law seemed to be listening to a one-sided conversation before hanging up. Putting down the receiver, she approached me with a troubled look. When I asked her what happened, she hesitated before speaking. "It was a call from Jennifer," she said. Jennifer was my brother-in-law's wife. Just hearing this name made me suspect it wasn't good news. Sure enough, she wanted to manage the in-laws' assets. My mother-in-law was confused about what she meant by managing their assets. Moreover, Jennifer said she'd come over the weekend to talk about it and hung up abruptly. Reluctantly, we discussed it with my father-in-law and my husband when they came home. My normally gentle father-in-law was furious when he heard about it. He tried calling my brother-in-law, but couldn't reach him, which made him even angrier. My husband was upset too, but was more focused on calming down his father. We couldn't get in touch with my brother-in-law for the rest of the week, and the dreaded weekend arrived. In the morning, we saw my brother-in-law just parking his car outside. We quickly went to my in-laws. My brother-in-law's family entered the living room without proper greetings. They had 2 elementary school-aged boys who were poorly disciplined. Immediately after entering the living room, they started annoying my mother-in-law by demanding fruit juice and snacks. Their mother just laughed, saying they were energetic and good kids. When my father-in-law finally lost his patience and scolded them, they became quiet. Up until that point, my brother-in-law was like a ghost, as if he wasn't even there. That was what happened all the time. He never disciplined his children or addressed his wife's behavior. We sat down at the table, ready to hear what my brother-in-law had to say. But it was his wife, Jennifer, who started talking. She rambled on, so it was hard to understand what she was trying to say. Basically, she was asking to let her manage all of the in-laws' finances. My in-laws were still quite healthy, so it was baffling why she suddenly started saying such a thing. My husband, curious, asked his brother to clarify, but before he could speak, Jennifer cut him off and started explaining. She mentioned a friend whose in-laws had suddenly passed away in an accident, and soon after the funeral, it was discovered that they had debts. She heard from her friend that it was a difficult situation. She was claiming that the same could happen to us and that she should manage the finances just in case. My father-in-law was the first to shout in anger. "Are you trying to say we're in debt?" Even I flinched at his words, but Jennifer was totally unfazed. "Well, that too, but if something happens, we're the ones who will be in trouble. As the wife of your elder son, I should manage everything. So there won't be any issue when it comes to dividing the assets, right?" I was almost impressed by her audacity to say such a thing. However, of course, my father-in-law wouldn't have it. After a moment of difficulty, he sighed and looked at Jennifer. He then told her that he would stop sending money for the children's birthdays and Christmas, which he had always done. My brother-in-law's family lived about 2 hours away by car and rarely visited. Apparently, my in-laws tried to treat my daughter and their grandchildren equally by sending them money so they could buy whatever they liked. Hearing this, Jennifer became enraged. If that's what you want, fine. But I won't take care of you and your wife ever again. We were all dumbfounded. After all, Jennifer had never once taken care of the in-laws. She never brought them any gifts when she visited, and always behaved like a guest. She would also let her children run wild, and they are always demanding things like, I want to eat this or, I want that. She hadn't even contacted the in-laws when my mother-in-law was hospitalized with her leg injury. After a moment of silence, my father-in-law calmly said, "Then we'll need you to return the car to us as well." The car my brother-in-law's family arrived in was bought by the in-laws. Initially, Jennifer only asked for things for the children, but at some point, she requested financial help to buy a car. My father-in-law was reluctant, but she pleaded that it was inconvenient without a car as the children were growing up, so eventually, the in-laws bought it for them. Jennifer really liked that car, and since commuting by car, my brother-in-law would really struggle without it. My brother-in-law and his wife went pale. But, Dad, that's going to be a problem. Finally, my usually invisible brother-in-law spoke up. After that, my father-in-law started lecturing, and once again, my brother-in-law looked down. Jennifer became quiet, but then my father-in-law's next words turned things upside down. Buy a car that you can afford yourself. As everyone nodded in agreement, Jennifer suddenly slammed the table and stood up. Your son is good for nothing. Then she started talking. I married him because he graduated from a famous university and works at a well-known company. I was only attracted to his status. We were stunned by her outrageous statements. Although he's always at work and barely comes home, his salary isn't even good. With what he makes, I can't live the luxurious life I envisioned. I was hearing this for the first time, and even my husband looked shocked. After that, Jennifer continued to complain about my brother-in-law. Then, she shifted her target to the in-laws. Maybe you raised him wrong. I am a suitable wife for the firstborn son, aren't I? You should be grateful that I married into this family. I just want to know what kind of upbringing you gave him. Unexpectedly, someone stood up. Enough. It was my brother-in-law. Don't talk about my parents like that. Everyone looked at him in surprise. He had always been the kind of person who couldn't speak his mind. He was grateful to his parents for supporting him through college. He wanted to reassure his parents who had been concerned, especially when his younger brother got married before him. I knew you were only attracted to my status. I hoped that might change if I did my best to meet your expectations. All that was in vain. But I didn't want to worry Mom and Dad. My brother-in-law spoke with a hint of sadness. When Mom hurt her leg, I asked you many times to let me visit her, but you refused, saying it was a waste of travel expenses. When the idea of building a two-family house came up, I was keen to live with Mom and Dad to support, as I am the firstborn son. But you wouldn't hear of it. In the end, we had to leave everything to Jason and Emily, which made me feel guilty. Hearing this, my mother-in-law became tearful. But Jennifer wouldn't stop. Then why did you even come here today? Frustrated with Jennifer, I just observed without interfering. My brother-in-law sighed and calmly began. Jennifer, I want a divorce. The next moment, a sharp sound echoed. Jennifer slapped my brother-in-law in the face. What are you talking about? My husband, who had been silent until then, finally intervened. My brother-in-law said he was tired of his earnings being squandered. Then, Jennifer's lifestyle came to light. A housewife fond of flashy things. She would buy designer items, frequent spas, and brag about all that when she went out for lavish lunch with friends. It seemed to be her hobby. To spend more on herself than on her children. There's never enough money for that kind of lifestyle. My brother-in-law's anger exploded. He then laid out the photos he took out from his bag, confronting her. How do you explain this? Jennifer's face stiffened. They were evidence of her having affairs. Having affairs, spending the money I earned, and now trying to get your hands on my parents' assets. He came to discuss divorce on that day. He thought discussing it in front of everyone would prevent her from manipulating the situation. Jennifer started apologizing profusely. My brother-in-law's decision seemed final, with all the evidence against her. Emily, say something. Suddenly, she grabbed my arm. "You've had an affair or two, haven't you, Emily?" I was about to retort, but my husband was quicker. "Don't ever disrespect my wife." Scolded by my husband, Jennifer sat down. Finally, I spoke up. "Is it normal to have affairs with the money your husband earns? Are you insane? What's with this being the firstborn son's wife? Have you ever contributed anything to your family? I love both my family and Jason's. I've never even thought of doing anything to make them sad. I know you wouldn't understand that." Everyone nodded in agreement. "Just leave," my brother-in-law demanded, throwing her purse out of the house. 3 months later, divorced, he asked for a transfer to another location at work, which wasn't far from where we all lived, and moved into a nearby apartment with his kids. It was tough for every one of us at first, having to deal with undisciplined kids. But they quickly learned how to behave and turned out to be quite obedient. My daughter, who initially didn't like them, is now playing the big sister, teaching them various things. My brother-in-law seems to have changed since that incident. The in-laws are relieved to see the change in him. As for Jennifer, she moved in with her boyfriend, who soon kicked her out for not bringing money to him, showing she was valued only for money, just as she had valued my brother-in-law only for his status. Jennifer apparently returned to her parents' home, but when they learned about her affair, they were furious. Under their strict supervision, she's now working multiple part-time jobs in her hometown to pay back the money she spent on herself over the years. According to my brother-in-law, the payments are being made regularly. He says that Jennifer often contacts him asking to see the children. However, the kids consistently say they don't want to see their mom. Given her preoccupation with her boyfriend and neglect of the children, it's no surprise they feel that way. As for me, I fell for my husband all over again after the way he stood up for me and what he said to Jennifer that day. Having my brother-in-law's kids around all the time is like having sons, which is fun. I love my daughter, but I often wondered if having a son would be more fun. And guess what? I'm expecting a baby boy this summer. Despite the turmoil caused by Jennifer, I feel quite satisfied with how everything turned out. The in-laws are still very much active, and we're all happy to be in a big, happy family.